British Army in our district was about September 1969, and they moved in and they built billets at the bottom of St Catherine's Road and Rodney Parade. Apparently they were supposed to be here for the protection of the people of this area because of the village just across the M1, and a lot of the people in the area welcomed them. We were very young, and of course we didn't know any difference. We thought it was great, the army coming in to defend us. And they were here a few weeks when a whole lot of people got together, and they were carried down tea to them, and there was collections lifted at certain houses. One house had taken a turn one night making the tea and carrying it down, and so on and so forth. And what I can remember is the time it was the turn for our house, and the woman that was in charge of it came and knocked the door, asked my mother would she fill up a few flasks and make sandwiches. My dad was sitting and he got up and he asked what it was about, and it was explained to him it was for the soldiers at the bottom of the street, and he told her to clear off, only in different words, and he insulted the woman. He said that well, you're feeding them at the moment, and in a few months' time I can guarantee they'll be shooting you. And as I say, we were very young at the time, we didn't realise what he was talking about. We'd heard the stories about years ago and the Troubles and how the British had treated the people here.
But after a few months, they raided a house in Rodney Parade, 2 houses in Rodney Parade, and that was old Mrs. Fellon's and old Mrs. Shannon's house. And I remember going to the bottom of the street, and there was a Scotch man there. He was like Kitley, he was a really small man, and he had a kilt on him. And we couldn't move laughing at the thoughts of, you know, a man in a kilt. And he was laying the whole law down and telling the raiding party what to do. They were in it for a few hours. They wrecked those houses. And I remember the next day, I'm down, and the people were saying, did you see the bouquets of flowers that left in the 2 old age pensioners? And they said this was for the inconvenience they had caused them. And they were all apologies, but everybody was shocked in the area. Raids were starting to take place. It wasn't too long after that every house started getting banged.
First the bin lids came out then.
Well, it was after these 2 houses were raided that, you know, the people became very weary then, and they started congregating in corners, and it was actually from the older people that we got the idea of bin lids. And they told us that noise creates confusion. So anytime they come in force then or into raid houses, we come out with the bin lids, pot lids, anything that made noise. You know, and this is when I can first remember the bin lids being brought in.
And as Sheila said, it was the first form of resistance from the people of these areas. As we could say, it was the only way you could resist at that time. You were frightened going out to bang bin lids, you know, whenever the soldiers did come in to raid. It did frighten you that they were able to do this. But still, you knew that you had to take a stand then, before it was your turn next, or before they really, you know, then we started believing what was told to us from the last 2 campaigns here in Northern Ireland, and we decided then, well, everybody really, I think, got it into their heads that this was going to come back, that the B specials were going to be sent into shooters, and that's whenever, as I say, that's whenever the resistance really started, through fear, and then really becoming aware that you weren't of what was taking place, and that you weren't going to sit back and let it take place.
I remember the British Army were pulled out from the billets at the bottoms of the streets, and by this time the people no longer trusted them, and they decided then that they would start their own defence. And a few people got together then to organise vigilantes. Can you remember, Sheila, what?
The vigilantes was made up of really old men and middle-aged men and young lads who decided to protect this area. And in protecting this area, they were protecting it with stones, bottles and hurley sticks. And those men stayed out in those barricades night and day. And the women of the area felt, well, what can we do? It's unfair that just the men protect our homes. So the women got together and decided, okay, we'll make the tea for them, and they can come into our houses and they can sleep there for a few hours. And during the day, the women minded the barricades. They looked after all this here. The men come out all night long. But then as time went on, women felt, well, they should have had a more serious role. And a lot of the older women got together and they went down. There was a hut down here at the back of O'Pre's in St James's Road, and those women went down and they formed up this committee, and they used to bring in, they used to have wee teas and things like this here, and they brought in money. And that money was, there was a few people had been imprisoned over 69, and that was McArthur, Billy McKay and Emmons, and they felt, okay, well, this was to keep their dependents while they were in jail. And older people who had come through campaigns, there was a lot of people then started getting falsely arrested, and they felt that we should be keeping these prisoners' families while they're in jail. And that's whenever they started up, they decided then they would have like PDF committees, they were called. So with the money that they had got up, they built an old hut at the back of the bog meadows there. Was there anything in it? And they used to go in there and they had meetings, and the meetings like were, what are we going to do tomorrow? Who's going to man the barricade while some other people's out looking after children and messages? And that's really the women's role then. But after a while, things become more serious. I mean, the Brits had started gunning our people down, and the peelers and all had get into the full swing of it. And then the vigilante committees decided they would take a more serious role, and the Republican movement, who were always in existence but a very, very low key in Belfast, men went into those channels. It was very, very secretive. Nobody knew how you get in or anything else. It was just formed. And we were in this hut, and men came in and said, the Irish Republican Army has been formed in the area, and it will be the defence of the area. And they wanted the women to have a women's defence committee. Now the women's defence committee was for bringing in funds, and these funds were for the prisoners, dependents' families. And then after that, they decided they'd form up like a CDC kind of a thing. I think it had been originally done in the Lower Falls, but there was a meeting up behind the chapel in the parochial hall, and Maura Drum and Flo Reardon, but we didn't know these women at all, and they came along to it, and they started to tell about women's role, what defence they could do, arm yourselves with hurley sticks. And if the Brits were starting to knock the men around in the area, then the women would come out and batter them. And this is really whenever the Women's Defence Committee got off the ground. That never ever fell through, because after that they had meetings, and you had internment broke out, and you had the false curfew. Now that women's group just done everything that had to be done. If there was people burned out of an area and they were flitting from place to place, they went into St. Louise's school, and you had to take the names of the people, where they were coming from in case their relatives wanted to know, and you had to try and get them fixed up in houses. And people around here who had big families of maybe 10 and 12 were offering to put people up in their houses too, you know. They were saying, well, like, they're our own people and they should